Hey guys, so recently I had a scenario with a customer where they needed to be able to group and reorder rows in a table. And this got me thinking about different scenarios, like what if I have a group in my table and then I'm trying to move a row up and the row above it is part of that group? How is that going to be handled? Or what if I want to move an entire group and I only have selected one of the rows of the group? How is that going to be handled? So this is what I came up with. Let me give you a little demo. I'm able to select any of the checkboxes in these rows. They don't have to be all together. They could be any row. And then I can move these rows down. I can move them up, and I can group them. And let me put a couple other groups on here. So that first scenario where I have a row that I want to move, if I move it up and the row above it is a group, it's just going to jump above that group. And not only that, but it reorders the group numbers so that they're always in this ascending order. Now, if I want to move my entire group and I select just one of the rows, it actually selects all of the rows. And then I can move the entire group down, move it up. And I could also ungroup if I wanted to. So I'm going to get rid of this group A, and what should be left, not group B and C, but group A and B, because there's only going to be two groups left. And so when I ungroup, I have an A and B. So let's take a look at how it works. First of all, on the table, this data property has a binding. If I open up this binding here, you can see that it's using a property binding to a custom property on my table. But this could easily be a named query binding. It's just returning a data set. And this script transform is basically just going through the table, the data, and it's adding this selected column to the data set and also to the headers, and then it's rebuilding the data set. I'm also using a custom function to get these dictionary objects for my different states of the selected column. And let's take a look at the columns, because my column for selected as well as my column for group are both set up to render as a view. And then I'm pointing them at my embedded view paths right there. And then on the custom properties of my table, I have a few things going on. First thing to look at is this selected property. So this has a binding pointed to the data property of the table. And then it has a script transform. And this is just looping through the data set and appending to this list any row index where the selected column is true. So what that looks like is, let's say I have my rows selected here. Let me unsort that. Okay, they are the first ones. So my selected, if I can see the whole thing, maybe. Value is true for these top two. So that's what that's looking for. And my selection should show index 0 and index 1. Okay, and then this groups property is doing pretty much the same thing, but instead of looking at the selected value, it's looking at the group columns value and appending any distinct group numbers. So if I group these and then select them, now I have group A selected here. I have group A in my list of groups, but notice I also have this property selected group is set to A. So let's look at that one. This one, again, is doing something pretty similar. It's just anytime my groups property or my selection property changes, it's going to rerun this transformation here where it looks through the row indexes in my selection, and then it looks up the group value for that row index in the data set and returns that group. Now this max group property is just looking for the highest value for that group value in the data set, and goes through the whole data set and spits out the highest value group. All right, pretty simple. The rest of this, my default data, you don't need to worry about that. This empty property, also don't need to worry about that. And source, I wouldn't worry about that. But control down, I have it bound to false. This isn't a necessary feature by any means, but what this is letting me do is if I hold control, you see that turns true, and then I can let it go. That's false. And if I hold it down true, I can click anywhere in the row and it'll select my row. If I don't have it held down, then I can click in these columns and it doesn't select it. I'd have to select here. So I'll show you how that works in a sec. Let's take a look at that now, actually. So on the table, still on the table, if we go to the configure events, I have a function for on key down and on key up. Let's look at those first. That's what's controlling the control down property. So if I hold down the control key, I set my control down property to true. If I let go of the control key, it sets it to false. And then for my on row click, I'm looking at that control down property, looking at my selection property and my selected column, as well as the row. Then I'm getting my my dictionary objects, and then I check if the selected column is selected or if I have control down true. I'm going to check the value of, like, what is the current value of that selected column for this row? Is it already selected? Is it not selected? And I'm also going to look at the group on that row. So if my selected value is not enabled, I'm just going to do nothing. Otherwise, I'm going to check if the row index that I have selected, if it's not in my selection, then I need to add it to my selection. So what do? I loop through my data. If any of the rows that I'm looping through have the same group as the group of the row that I have selected, then I'm going to add those to my selection as well and update the value of my selected field in that row so that it shows selected as well. Otherwise, I'm just going to actually, if there's not a match, right? If I'm not selecting, if I've selected a row with a group, and as I'm looping through my data set, any row without that group is going to show the select disabled. And I want to do that because if I have this group selected, I don't really want to be able to select any other rows. It gets more easy to see once I have multiple groups in here. If I select this, I don't want to also be able to select this. The only time when I can have something selected and then continue to select is if I'm selecting something without a group. Okay. And then I'm just setting my data to my new data. If my row index is in the selection, then I'm going to go through my data set for row in my selection, and I'm going through it in reverse order. I'm going to check if the row is this row index. If it is, then I'm going to update that row in the data set and set the selected value to not selected. Otherwise, if the group of this row as I'm looping through. If the row's group value is equal to my selected, the row that I had selected, that I've just clicked on, if that is the same group and the group is not none, then I'm going to set the value of that row as I'm looping through to not selected. So this lets me deselect the entire group, basically. And then I'm updating my data property. Kind of complicated going through, but if you go line by line, it makes sense how everything's working. Now, let's take a look at this group button. So this group button is setting up some variables here for the table, the selection, and my new data that I'm going to assign back to my data property. And I'm looking at each row index in that selection property. And then table custom max group and group. Okay, so I have my max group set to the current max group property on that table. And then I'm getting my new group essentially by using this custom function. We'll take a look at that. But I'm just passing in my max group, and out is coming the next available group essentially. And then I'm setting the value at this row for my group equal to that new group. Grabbing my dictionary objects here so that I can get the value for not selected. And then for each row in my data, I'm setting any other row. Let's see. I'm just setting my, so for row index in my data, I'm setting new data equal to itself with the value of selected changed to not selected. So what that is doing is after I've grouped these right here, then I'm just deselecting them so that after I group the rows, I'm no longer selecting the rows. Okay. And then I'm just doing a sort here, sorting the data by group so that my groups will always be next to each other. The rows will be one after the other in a group. And then I assign my table props data back to my new data. All right. Now for the up and down buttons. So here's the up button. Got some variables here for the table, data, selection, my groups, and my new data. And then I've defined this function to be able to get the new row index as I'm moving a row or a group. Well, I'm really only doing it one row at a time. I'm passing in the new data and I'm passing in my row index. And then this is, if it's the very first row, it's not going to do anything, but otherwise it's going to take a look at the destination group. So the row that I'm trying to move it to, the new row index, I'm going to look at that row's group. And if that group is none, then I'm not going to do anything. But if that destination group is this group, this row's group, where do I have that? Destination group equals group. Why don't I see group? Destination group equals group. Where even is this? I don't think that is defined anywhere. Well, what it's supposed to be doing is this. Group equals, and not the new row index, but just my row index. Yeah, so if the destination group is the same as the current row that I'm trying to move's group, okay, then ignore it. Just do nothing there. Because what I've already made my new row index. So this function, first of all, it's creating a new row index, which is just one less than my current row. Since we're moving it up in the table rows, we got to move the index down. Now we have our current rows group. And so if my new row index is 0, pass, else, check my destination rows group. If it's none, pass. I'm still just going to use new row index, whatever this turns out to be. Else, if the destination group is the same as this group, then pass. I'm still going to use whatever this turns out to be. Else, I'm going to, so if it's not the same as this group, if it's not none and it's not the same group, then it's a different group. And so I need to check the row above that destination row and check its above destination group. So I'm checking the row above that, my new row index -1, and the group column. If that is the same as the destination rows group, then I need to rerun this function here, get new row index, so that I continue to increment this down, decrement this, and until I get a row index that is valid. Basically, I'm trying to find, since I'm going up in the rows, I'm trying to find the next available spot that doesn't get in between a group. Okay, that's a lengthy explanation for this little function. That's what it's doing. Now, for the rest of the script, I just go through my selection, all of those row indexes. I'm going to, for each one, have a new row, which will be using my new data, and I'm grabbing the value at every cell, at every column in that row that's in the data already. So yeah, so get value at row index column for column in range data, get column count. That's what that's doing. And then here's my group, new data, get value at row index group. Oh, that's where I'm getting it. Yeah, because it was never an issue before. I think that I don't need that there because it's here, and this is being executed in the context where this already exists. I think that's why that works. Okay, so new row index is using that function, passing in my new data and my current row index where I am in the selection. And then I'm going to first delete this row, and then I'm going to add it at its new row index. All right, kind of a little bit complicated in here, but we got through it. Now we just need to look at the down arrow. Before we do, one last thing here. This function, new data equals table update groups. Since I moved the row up and it could have gone, from group C, now it should be group B. That's what this function here is doing. We'll take a look at that in a minute. So the down button starts the same, sets up some variables, and it has a custom function. I'm not going to walk you line by line through this one. It's basically doing the same thing, but in reverse. And then I go through all of my row indexes in selection, but I'm going through them in reverse order. And I build out my new row. I check my rows group. I get my new row index. And then I first delete the row and then add the row. And then I update my groups and set my new data. One more button, then we'll take a look at the update group script. So on my ungroup button, again, setting some variables for table selection. I have a timestamp and username that I don't think I'm using in this scenario. Then I have my new data, and I'm going for row index in selection. My new data is going to be new data, but I'm setting the value of group to none because I'm ungrouping it, right? And then here's my column dictionary objects and my not selected object, and for row index in my data. So I'm looping through the whole data. I'm setting the value of selected to not selected. Then I do a sort by group because there may be other groups in the table still. And we want to sort those so that they're always in order. And then I'm going to update my groups and set my data. All right, now let's take a look here. On the table, once again, I have this custom method here, update groups. And what this is doing is it starts off with no group, current group and new group, none. And then it looks through all the rows of the, I'm passing in something called new data, right? So it looks through all of the rows in new data. It looks at the group. If it says if the group is none, do nothing. Otherwise, if the group is the current group, in this case, when it starts none, then we're going to set my new data at this row, the group column, set it to my new group. So still just assigning none for groups that are none. But if my group is not the current group, then I'm going to assign my current group to this group, and then I'm going to get a new group. So exchange, this is the path to my custom function here, increment group. I'm passing in this new group, and it's going to spit me out a new group value. And then I'm just setting that value for my group at the row and returning my data. I suppose that we should look at those scripts so you know what is happening on the back end there. In my scripts here, first of all, I have my get column dict objects. This is how I'm getting those selected, not selected, and select disabled values. These are just dictionary objects with keys for enabled, value, path, and style. So that returns this whole list. Then I have this get group style function, which is being used by the embedded view for group, the group embedded view. This is how it's getting its color. So I pass in a group, and because I'm using alphabetic characters, I'm using this to get a numeric value for the group passed in. And then I'm just turning it into a single 0 through 9 value and returning one of these 10 colors. Then I have this increment group function here. If the group is null, then I'm going to return A. That's the first group. Then I'm getting the last character of my group, because it could be AA or BB, BBB, right? So if my last character is Z, then I want it to be the next group to be an A, else my group is just going to increment to the next character. And the decrement group works the same way, just in reverse. Now let's take a look at one more thing I forgot to mention on this table. My selection property has a change script. So if I take a look at that change script, let's see, where is it? Here's my change script. So I'm making sure that it only triggers off of changes from the binding. And when the previous value is either none or the previous value is not the same as the current value. So it didn't update with the same value. I'm grabbing my not selected object from this function here. Then I'm checking if the length of my selection, my current value.value, if the length is 0, if I have nothing selected, then I need to update my rows. I'm going to loop through all of the rows of my data, and I'm going to set the selected value to not selected. And the reason I need to do this, let me just show you. If I have this not enabled, let's just apply it. If that's not enabled, when I have some groups here, oops. Oh, you can see it already. When I deselect my group, I can't select anything except for that group. So when that change script is running, now if I select this and then deselect it, everything becomes selectable again. Okay, needed to point that out. That's pretty important. Now let's look at these embedded views. Here's the checkbox. And remember, this is taking a object value. Actually, if we look at this data set and click on this selected column, you can see that the selected column type is object. That's something that I didn't know that a data set could do before needing to build this, but pretty cool that you can have a object column type in a data set. All right, so here's my checkbox embedded view. I'm getting a value passed in. This is actually, I think, configured for not specifically this project, but this is kind of how I've been setting up embedded table columns for a lot of different projects. Column index, row data, row index, and value all get passed in by default when you're embedding views in a table. These just show up. I mean, they get passed in. You have to create the parameters here, but you don't have to pass them in explicitly from the table. This source is something that I've often used to, if I'm sending a message back to my table, I use the source and I pass that in from the table. And then I check that on a received message so that I know that the update that I'm receiving is for the table that I have it set up on. Anyway, you don't really need to know that, because I think that I set this up more specifically for this for this use case. So on my actual icon, the checkbox is an icon. I have my path parameter set up like this. So I'm trying to get out of a JSON object, I'm trying to get my path property. This looks a little bit cumbersome. It's, again, something that's kind of a holdover from, excuse me, supposed to take a break. Kind of a holdover from how I have been doing table columns. In the past, I've had table columns that I've used in both data sets and JSON data sets. And so this is right here to handle a JSON data set. But I've only built this to use data sets for now. And you could change that. You could get it to work with a JSON data set. But just know that just know that this will work either with a JSON data set or a regular data set. You don't need to change this. It's just trying to get the path property out of that incoming value for the selected column. And same thing basically with my styles, background color, doing a JSON get for the value and then a JSON get for the style. For color, same thing, just getting that color, and same thing for cursor. That's it for checkbox. Let's take a look at the group. Again, I have those same parameters set up. Style is set up the same way. This is a little bit different actually. So I'm looking at my value parameter, and then if it's not none, because my group, or is this for group? Since my group could be none, I have this check here first. If it is not none, then I'm going to run that function to get my row color. That's how I'm doing that, get group style. I guess it's not just getting a background color, it's getting the whole style object. Otherwise, I'm just, if it is none, I'm just returning an empty dictionary. So I want to mention that this project is going to exist on the Ignition Exchange. If not by the time you're watching this, very, very soon. That's about everything for this video. I hope that this has been helpful to you and that you can find a use case for this sort of thing. If you have any questions, leave them down below and I'll try to get to them in a timely manner. Otherwise, thank you for watching and we'll see you in the next one.